welcome everybody. Breakfast time with Max. I want to share a little bit about stress and the importance of stress, the negatives of stress, and what the heck stress is from a physiological standpoint. Why, as a human, this matters to you. Not just as an athlete, as a human, this matters. So, turn back the clock really quick. Hans Selye, if I say his name correctly, way back in the day, some argue he should have won a Nobel Prize for this. There's some debates about it. But he developed the idea of a general stress syndrome. Come here, egg. And the idea is very simple, that the body has a series of stages that it goes through in order to react to a stressor. Stressor being anything from a noxious agent, from psychological stress to extreme physical exertion, anything that forces the body to overcome. And it makes total sense because the body doesn't want a whole bunch of individual systems to have to deal with something. Like, oh, I gotta turn on I need to walk across the street energy system, and then I need to deal with my big lecture coming up stress system. It has a general stress system. And this general stress system serves a purpose of mobilization of energy. So, if I have to overcome something, I need energy to do it. I need to go speak in front of a crowd, I need to go play a basketball game, I have to go work on a project. You need energy, and your body only has a finite source of energy. So, think of it like an adaptive energy. There's only so much energy you can have to adapt to things. And obviously that depends on your current state in the physiological system. So like, if you're really tired, you have less energy. If you haven't eaten as much food, if you've done other things, that's taking your energy, right? So this adaptive energy is finite. It is not infinite. You have a limit to it. So Hans Selye was like, okay, cool. The body responds to this in a specific pattern, we should say, to stress. At certain points in time, you do a little bit of stress. It can create positive change. You do too much stress. It can create negative change. But the big thing that never got fully elucidated till later, and this is the Russian sports science world, was the idea of specificity. Now, Hans Selye does touch upon this in this discussion, but yes, there's a general stress response. Your body does something in order to overcome a stress. But this leads to a specific adaptation. General response, specific change, right? You don't go do bicep curls and get huge calves. You don't do a research paper and run a marathon better. What you do, you get better at. And so we have a bridging of these two worlds. We have a general response. That is an activation of the HPA axis. You can think about hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal. This is your autonomic nervous system. It has two branches, your sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic is for rest and digest. I said parasympathetic is rest and digest. Sympathetic is the system for heightened activation and mobilization. They work hand in hand, and when we think about stress, we think about the sympathetic nervous system, right? Stressed out activation. So, as humans, we need to, well, think about this, go back in time. We're living in the wild and we see an animal, a predator, or something comes up that's not good. A fire occurs and our tent is being burnt down. We need activation of resources quickly. So this system works fast. There's a fast system and then like a little bit slower system. And they're governed by hormonal pathways. But nowadays in the life we live, we have stress evoked all the time. And non-mobilization necessary situations. So like, oh, when is this text message going to come through? Right? Stress and information are often correlated to each other, right? If, I have new set of information, that's a new possible stressor. As information and rate of information increases, stress increases on the body. And our body has to adapt to that. So that's why some people say you can become addicted to stress. And some people, classic example, they go on vacation. They actually get sick on vacation because they start to relax. And they have a desensitizing of the stress state, which actually sometimes If you're so used to being in a stress state, some people argue you have a reduction in, I just splashed egg on myself. You have a reduction in immunoefficiency. Interesting discussion there. I have not elucidated I have not read anything that elucidates as to why that occurs. It tells me why that occurs. I need to turn on this microwave, but I don't want to do it because you guys are on here with me. I'll wait a second. So basically, we have a stress state. We adapt to what we do. Nowadays, with information being so fast and often, we have tons of stresses. Think about a day. If we just like watch a bird out there. Imagine that you were just living out there. The types of things that you would encounter that would be unexpected would be so much lower than what we have in today, because you turn on a phone and naturally it's supposed to be unexpected. You turn on TV, it's supposed to be unexpected. Unexpected is engaging, but unexpected is stressful. Kind of like that dopamine addiction type deal. So we get a stress state. So, twofold. There's a psychosomatic aspect of it. Psycho being psychology, somatic being your body. And then you can think about the psychology affecting your body, right? If you have a bunch of stress psychologically, well, you have to cope with that, and some of those adaptive energies goes towards that. Secondary to that, or not secondary, but another branch of that same tree would be the physiological stress, specific adaptations to that. And so if I'm lifting weights, I'm going to get better at the type of lifting I do. There isn't really a general form of strength. People say that a lot, but it's not very true. If there's a general form of strength, then if you do one thing, this core pillar of strength will affect all things else. So if I were to go squat a whole bunch, is that going to help me climb the monkey bars? If I'm going to, it has to help all things, not just things that involve your legs, right? Let's just break that example down really quick because I want to explain it and make sure it's clear. When people say, oh, there's no such thing like this general strength. If I squat, there's nothing general about that. I'm specifically training my legs. Just because I call it general doesn't mean it is general strength. I am specifically using a squat to train my legs. It's cool. So I won't like all of a sudden, if I had to isolate something that doesn't involve my legs, like, I don't know, like I said, climbing the monkey bars or being able to, I don't know, twirl a baton quickly with my wrist. It's not going to somehow get better because my legs got stronger. It just happens that lots of things we do in life involve interactions with the ground and our legs, so squatting has a high utility to many different things. It doesn't make it general, it's just specific to lots of stuff, or moderately specific. But then there's like branches of specificity, so how the muscles interact with the ground, how your body interacts with the ground, and how those muscles have to cope with it. Like if you run, jump, and sprint, change direction. The rate of which force is applied, the range of motion which is force applied. This is called dynamic correspondence, by the way, from Verkhoshansky, very famous list of 5 things that, help guide understanding the purpose of an exercise. But basically, it's, if I might miss some of these, it's like range of motion, rate of loading, type of muscles, duration of use, and maybe intention, like the velocity or the effort which you're doing it, put forth on it. Basically, it's specific, and so when you do things certain ways, certain things changes. So you have this general stress response still, the same way you have the psychological stress response and nervousness, and whatever you have, the hypothalamus, pituitary adrenal activation, you have it during exercise as well, and that leads to a cascade of events where you mobilize energy, and then you have to overcome the exercise event. So like you do the specific thing, but what's interesting, this is the general versus specific, the metabolites of what you do, so when you run and jump and sprint, the certain interactions of maybe osteoclast breaking down, osteoclast breaking down bone, or you have degradation of certain proteins, or you have structural degradation of maybe tendons or soft tissues. Those metabolites signal some form of rebuilding. That's how your body knows how to rebuild specific tissues. It's not just like, hey, build random tissues. It's like, hey, this area had a level of disruption. There's going to be myokines in the area, which are things released from the muscles that signal to the rest of the body, hey, we need stuff, and there's a feedback loop to help rebuild stuff. Now, this is where those adaptive energies come into play, because if I'm not eating enough food, I'm not sleeping enough, I don't have enough actual substrate to rebuild, I only had a lot of energy to overcome the event, not to rebuild the event, I don't create adaptation. So you need to think about it in like a threefold manner. I have to overcome the initial endeavor. I have to somehow repair the broken down structures that occurred because I was overcoming that endeavor. And then I have to rebuild higher the next time, because this is the key. If I get stronger and more fortified, same way you get a callus on your hand, the less likely you are to get a blister next time if you shovel. If you get stronger muscles, the less likely you'll have muscle degradation when you encounter the same exercise. So it's actually adaptive to try and overcome, and try and rebuild, try to rebuild stronger to a common stressor. And that's the last thing I want to say is common stressor. It is the fact that it's a redundant exposure to something. If I keep exposing myself to something, I keep shoveling, I'm going to get blisters. I don't just shovel one time and get blisters. It's a consistent exposure. And we actually adapt to reduce the disruption in homeostasis. I am really strong, then something moderately heavy doesn't really cause that much damage on my body. So it doesn't cost that much adaptive energy. It doesn't cause a large general stress response. It's pretty easy for me to deal with. So it's easy to overcome. I don't really have to adapt much. So this is the idea of progressive overload. So then I have to progressively add in a stimulus that might be a little bit more demanding on the body, that causes some breakdown to create positive change. And that's going to create adaptation. And so you have specificity, you have exposure and consistency, you have adaptive energy, you have the psychosomatic aspect of it, because that's connected to the adaptive energy. You have the general pathway of mobilization of energy of how your body overcomes these certain things. Then you have the specific pathways, the specific pathway your body has to actually adapt. Super interesting stuff. I don't want to dive too far into it. I totally could, but I want to eat my eggs with my breakfast. I'm now getting cold over here. So I wanted to share that with you guys, because it's not just this like super straightforward, hey, I lift weights and whatnot. And that probably covers, 80% of stuff. Or the idea that stress is stress and whatever. And that probably covers 80% of it. And for most people who are encountering life in a normal way that isn't that of an athlete or hyper-specific, sure, it's probably good enough. But for the people I work with and what I try to accomplish, I don't want good enough. I want to try to be the best I possibly can. And so that last 20% really matters to me. I'm going to eat my eggs. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And we'll do another breakfast one later on the line. Take care.